eyes, Don could read their message with effortless ease. 500 feet below, stretching out to the limits of his submerged horizon, was the scattering layer, the blanket of life that covered half the world. The sunken meadow of the sea, it rose and fell with the passage of the sun, hovering always at the edge of darkness. During the night it had floated nearly to the surface, but the dawn was now driving it back into the depths. It was no obstacle to his sonar. Don could see clear through its tenuous substance to the ooze of the Pacific floor, over which he was driving high as a cloud above the land, but the ultimate depths were no concern of his. The flocks he guarded, and the enemies who ravaged them, belonged to the upper levels of the sea. Don flicked the switch of the depth selector, and his sonar beam concentrated itself into the horizontal plane. The glimmering echoes from the abyss vanished, and he could see more clearly what lay around him, here in the ocean's stratospheric heights. That glowing cloud 2 miles ahead was an unusually large school of fish. He wondered if Base knew about it, and made an entry in his log. There were some larger blips at the edge of the school, the carnivores pursuing the cattle, ensuring that the endlessly turning wheel of life and death would never lose momentum. But this conflict was no affair of Don's. He was after bigger game. Sub 5 drove on toward the west, a steel needle swifter and more deadly than any other creature that roamed the seas. The tiny cabin, now lit only by the flicker of lights from the instrument board, pulsed with power as the spinning turbines thrust the water aside. Don glanced at the chart and noted that he was already halfway to the target area. He wondered if he should surface to have a look at the dead whale. From its injuries, he might be able to learn something about its assailants, but that would mean further delay, and in a case like this, time was vital. The long-range receiver bleeped plaintively, and Don switched over to transcribe. He had never learned to read code by ear, as some people could do, but the ribbon of paper emerging from the message slot saved him the trouble. Air Patrol reports School 50-100 Wales, heading 90 degrees grid ref X186593, Y432011, stop. Moving at speed after change of course, stop. No sign of orcas, but presume they are in vicinity, stop. Rockwell. Don considered this last piece of deduction highly unlikely. If the orcas, the dreaded killer whales, had indeed been responsible, they would surely have been spotted by now as they surfaced to breathe. Moreover, they would never have let the patrolling planes scare them away from their victim, but would have remained feasting on it until they had gorged themselves. One thing was in his favor. The frightened herd was now heading almost directly toward him. Don started to set the coordinates on the plotting grid, then saw that it was no longer necessary. At the extreme edge of his screen, a flotilla of faint stars had appeared. He altered course slightly and drove head-on to the approaching school. Part of the message was certainly correct. The whales were moving at unusually high speed. At the rate they were traveling, he would be among them in 5 minutes. He cut the motors and felt the backward tug of the water bringing him swiftly to rest. Don Burley, a knight in armor, sat in his tiny, dim-lit room 100 feet below the bright Pacific waves, testing his weapons for the conflict that lay ahead. In these moments of poised suspense, before action began, he often pictured himself thus, though he would have admitted it to no one in the world. He felt, too, a kinship with all shepherds who had guarded their flocks back to the dawn of time. Not only was he Sir Lancelot, he was also David, among ancient Palestinian hills, alert for the mountain lions that would prey upon his father's sheep. Yet, far nearer in time, and far closer in spirit, were the men who had marshaled the great herds of cattle on the American plains scarcely 3 lifetimes ago. They would have understood his work, though his implements would have been magic to them. The pattern was the same, only the scale of things.